Welcome back to the show, it's Gay for May, and now that Legacy is seeing its stateside release, it's time to start asking the big questions. Is the Transformers community going to be receptive to the new Legacy Prime style figures, which have been designed to dramatically overhaul the fan favorite Prime characters to fit in with a G1 aesthetic? We covered a few very critical early reactions to the reveal a while back, but recently I ran my own poll with my followers and Chromfies, and the overwhelming majority were positive about at least one of the new figures. I was under the impression that these were more controversial, and I guess I was wrong. So now that I have Legacy Prime Universe Bulkhead in hand, it seems it's high time to give my conclusive thoughts on not just the toy itself, but the design philosophy behind it. What do I think about this redesign? And what did I realize about this figure that completely changed the way I looked at him? While Prime Bulkhead's alternate mode is originally a big green SUV, this release instead turns into an armored military truck. Now, Bulkhead as a franchise character is no stranger to having his alt mode changed, but this isn't supposed to be a new version of Bulkhead. It's supposed to be the Prime version having stepped into a vague, multi-dimensional plane of existence. But I don't change my skin color when I step into a church's chicken, so I don't understand why doing this would change Bulkhead's alternate mode. It feels like the designers must have been determined to create something entirely un-Bulkhead, and you just have to wonder why. But ignoring all of that context, is the truck mode any good? Well, they've definitely put more than a little effort into it. There's a lot of intricate paintwork on the cab, from the black lining around the windows to these smaller details such as the wipers, the mirrors, and these little tabs. But the rest of the vehicle is pretty much entirely unpainted. Despite that, this truck is rich with detail. Lots of lines and rivets on the cab. The gas tanks on the sides have caps and straps holding them down, and you can see the struts supporting the loose, wrinkled canvas of the canopy from underneath. This is probably unintentional, but because the arms poke up from behind the windows, it kind of looks as if there's two little seats in there, and the feet can be lowered as a ramp leading into the bed of the truck. Between the impressive sculpted details and the other features, this vehicle mode feels a lot more authentic and realistic, closer to a model truck than a typical Transformers toy. I do wish that the canopy wasn't a necessity to complete the vehicle mode though. Well, you can remove it, but doing so exposes his taint and bits. I also think the bed's a little too short, or at least part of the side railing could have extended further up to cover this exposed part of his leg. I believed the transformation would be very simple, but it's actually somewhat involved. The extra complexity in forming the body giving him a bit more pizzazz than if you were to just ape an Optimus style transformation scheme. And I like the clever move of hiding the gas tanks within the legs. It's an easy but effective way of removing unwanted kibble from the robot mode, and I'd love to see similar moves on future Transformers. Legacy Bulkhead's robot mode is where the most contention about the design is. As an adaptation of Prime Bulkhead, this figure only resembles him in the most superficial ways. I think the designers went, oh, he's green, he's got an underbite, that's Bulkhead. But you know who else is green and has an underbite? Crumplezone. So how do I know you weren't trying to make him and you just failed the assignment spectacularly? Please look forward to my dissertation on how Ransack and Crumplezone were the original Knockout and Breakdown, available exclusively on Matreon. I'm definitely willing to believe that they made the wrong character. There are basically no details taken from his Prime model. Not to spoil any reviews that may or may not be upcoming, but it definitely appears that the designers went to great lengths to try to preserve the design integrity of one Prime character, but not the other. Hasbro obviously creates figures with the intention to make multiple different toys out of them, but by neglecting to include the things that make Bulkhead Bulkhead, they've presented us with someone incredibly generic looking. And in a weird way, this almost makes Bulkhead seem as if he's the retool, and that this mold is really meant for another character. It makes me wonder whether they should have made a different character first, with Bulkhead being relegated to a retailer exclusive instead, or released further down the main line. But that isn't to say that there aren't merits to this figure. He's shockingly posable. His arms have an over 90-degree bend to them, his head's got good range, and his enormous feet help him stay standing even in the most extreme poses. A lot of interesting details were revealed, such as these riveted plates that ground him to his armored military alternate mode, and it's also pretty cool how his color palette shifts, going from lime green and olive green to lime green and silver. I was expecting to be fairly disappointed by his proportions, but the pictures did a bad job of portraying him accurately. His arms aren't quite as thin as I thought they were. His legs aren't quite as long as they originally seemed. He looks pretty good next to deluxe figures, but man, I wish he was bigger. Basically double dealer size. They definitely could have used some of that extra money from a leader class budget to fill in the hollow cavern in his chest. It's a nice discreet place if you need to store your weed, I suppose, or some nuts. But I can practically stick my whole finger in there too. I wonder what else I could stick in there. Bulkhead also features a nice little set of weapons. Bulkhead's classic wrecking ball, made to crack those nuts that I mentioned earlier, as well as an Energon minigun that could be handheld or mounted over his shoulder. Listen, we're all thinking it, but I'm not going to be the guy who gets in trouble for saying it. And you can also remove the truck canopy and use it as a shield. It's cool because it reminds me of a big Gundam shield, but I prefer leaving it attached to his back where it's out of the way. So on one hand, they've really missed the mark for making him look like the Prime character. But I think Bulkhead's pretty solid otherwise, and there's nothing that annoys me in particular. And honestly, I think you could headcanon this figure solely as a G1 Bulkhead and remove the Prime element entirely. But then I saw through Hasbro's great lie. The vehicle mode, the big truck cab for a chest, the placement of the colors, the slope of his shoulders, the look of his feet. The scales fell from my eyes and it became so clear. Obviously he isn't Prime Bulkhead, and he isn't even G1 Bulkhead. He's actually animated Bulkhead. Now listen, I know I'm a huge animated mark and us animated fans are absolutely starving at this point. I would literally sell my cat's kidneys if it meant I could get new animated figures. All I'm saying is that based on my expert analysis of this figure, Legacy Bulkhead shares closer similarities with the animated incarnation of Bulkhead, and that potentially they could have easily sold this toy as a more faithful translation of that character rather than the Prime version. So why did they try to sell everybody on this being an interpretation of Prime Bulkhead when the fan base can clearly see that it doesn't actually resemble Prime Bulkhead at all? I definitely believe that the potential controversy was a calculated factor in this guy's release. Plus, it makes sense that Legacy Bulkhead was created to commemorate Prime's recent 10th anniversary, so any similarities to other Bulkheads that I'm seeing is probably mostly coincidental. But imagine if they took this figure and gave him animated Bulkhead's armored cab. With the thin black windshield and the large sloping green roof, it would have made him look a lot more visually dynamic than the blocky Gundam cosplay we see him in here, although the proportions still wouldn't be quite right and he would be missing other key details like the clawed hands. But this is all wishful thinking on my part, and it's kind of unfair to wax poetic on what a figure could be rather than objectively discussing what it is. And I don't dislike Legacy Bulkhead. On the contrary, I actually enjoy him. It surprised me and impressed me with its engineering. He's a lot of fun because he has different weapon options, and having him in hand is a way different experience than seeing him in photos, because I thought I understood everything about this figure before I had him, and I was wrong. So much like ordering a foreign bride from a shady darknet website, there's a big difference between what you see on the screen and what you actually get. And with Bulkhead, you get a decent Transformer. One that's not quite what people had hoped for, but I think it's one that deserves a chance at a spot in your collection. But anyway, that's just my opinions. Please leave yours in the comments below. Bye bye.